Hello, my dear friends. How are you? It is the 2nd of March. Welcome to today's video. I'm Chris with LA Wave Cafe. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the markets. We've been having a little bit of a sell-off in here in the equities. Recovered most of the overnight futures throughout the day, but I still think this bounce is pretty weak. Bitcoin, it is recovering quite well in here, so definitely an interesting movement that we'll take a look at here shortly and see where that takes us. But you know, the equity market, it is in a very jittery mood following the developments out there in Middle East, and we could see basically a little bit of a move higher in the oil. I could say maybe a little bit more. We could see a bounce in the metals and a sell-off in risk assets. A little bit of a recovery today, I guess, and we'll see where that goes because we are still below the key 10-week moving average. The wave count we're following in the equities is for a wave 2, which it does seem to be underway as long as obviously we remain below the highs of this week back in here, whenever this was in at some point, sometimes in January. I mean, it's been so long, since the market actually made a new all-time high that that I don't even know what it is. So it's several weeks back. If we take a look at the daily time frame in here in the S&P, we've broken through this lower part of this kind of converging price action. If this is the top of the wave one, we're looking for this move to be like a 1-2-1-2 that would lead to an extreme move lower. The first sign that this proposed count is in trouble, it's obviously a move back above the swing high back here. If we're starting to move back above 69.87, things are definitely gonna look different for the S&P. By that time, it will be above the moving average. So we could be on a kind of relief rally that nothing more major is happening out there. But again, I think the market was already on a weak note. And trading with the weak tone, even before these developments starting happening. So, I'm not going to put a lot of this kind of back and forth action in kind of what's going on out there in Iran. I'm going to continue to kind of look for prices, for weakness, for breaks in the way the stock trades versus interest rates versus the dollar. Just this kind of how the macro tape continues to look. Now, we did open weaker, south of 1% in the indices, and we recovered quite well. You can see, kind of how we closed towards the high of this candle. But the move higher was corrective, was just in three waves. And short of a lot more chop, I really don't see this all of a sudden accelerating with a lot of power upwards. We'll see what happens, but that's kind of my take at the moment. So I'm going to conclude here in the S&P, I'm going to take this as the first clue that, this 1-2 move, it's probably coming under pressure and it's not going to pan out. So we'll see we'll see kind of where that goes. But these are my thoughts on this index. Now the S&P, the Dow Jones, I'm sorry, the Nasdaq, it is a little bit weaker. We did have quite a bit of a recovery in there as well. I see this whole move as a three-wave move up, and this is maybe the initial move, the first leg with the wave 2, and then we'll see if we can get, or the wave B, and then see if we can get a further rally down. But again, the trigger for, not the trigger, but this is where we're wrong once we move back above these levels. Because see, a lot of people are not telling you this. I just watched the video over the weekend with some guy talking options and how you're buying this bull spread over here and you're selling this put over here to finance the bull spread, and it's all nice and great, but there was not even one mention about what do you do if this thing moves against you. Now the options are not easy. They're You got to look at time, you got to look at volatility. There's just so many things that go into those Greeks and the way they act that, before you know it, you could be, down 30, 40, 50% on that option if the market moves against you. And if you don't take action quickly in the options, it's just going to be losses, but not even one mention into that. So that's why, you see, every time I come over here and I tell you about a move, I always try to tell you, short if I forget or something, but I always try to tell you where discount, where I would get out, where I would change my mind. And I think about that as a stop loss for that count, for that move. Now, sure, you could say, Chris, what? Well, this count is still valid until it actually moves back above this wave, right? Because this could morph into WXY, XZ, and you can still be right. Sure, but remember the chances of that working out, if your assumption is that this was the top of the B wave and your assumption is the market should move lower and it doesn't, that means you're wrong in that assumption. You're wrong in thinking that the B wave top was there. Now you take your loss and you try again if you see the setup developing, but giving the market a chance to morph, that's giving a chance to your account to morph into something else that you don't want to, because you let it go a little bit in here, and then before you know it, you're moving higher, and now you're changing, from this being a wave one to this being some kind of a B, C, and you're in some kind of a weird flat, and you're imagining all the scenarios where the original thought of the trade was one, and whatever we're thinking right now, it's something totally different. So, I would say, continue to look at this if you're new to Elliott Wave. I mean, if you've done it a while and you still find yourself in situations where you're adjusting counts, but you're not adjusting your losses and your exits, you got to revise that. So that's kind of my thinking here. Anyway, this was just a short parenthesis on this move. Long story short, this is the cutoff for discount, and I'm looking for this move to continue lower. If it doesn't, we have to reassess. So that's on the Nasdaq. Let's see, silver had a pretty good move today, and kind of overnight again, maybe as a reaction, maybe as a pullback. But what's interesting in silver is the fact that we actually have retraced 61.8 of the sell-off, and I would definitely pay attention here, because this is the places where you usually get, sometimes a B wave. So if this, or an X wave, right? If this is an ABC with a W, so I'm sorry, with an X, so WX, and then a wave Y, this is the area that we could react, and we could begin the next leg lower or the next corrective move. If it's a triangle, which I think will probably end up having as part of this fourth wave red. We'll see how that develops, but that's kind of where I'm definitely watching the 61.8 for those wanting to short this move for whatever reason. It's as good as a place as any. But remember, if the market moves above the 78.6, you're running the risk for this to continue higher. So just know, kind of based on the 61.8, where your stop is, and make sure you respect that, I guess. So that's the the silver move in here. So now let's take a look at Bitcoin and see where this is going. And I'm going to look briefly just at the weekly here at the bottom part, and you can see how now we're starting to, although the week just begun, we're starting to get a little bit of a sign that some buyers are coming in, which is what we were talking about last week as the market was declining. Like, there's no point to do anything in Bitcoin until we start to see signs appearing that somebody is interested in buying. And the volume, we just began the week, so there's not much there. We'll see how we close. I'm still going to be patient. I'm not going to jump on this just because, this little thing appeared on here, but it's something that, definitely merits attention. And now if we go over to the wave count, this is the idea, is that maybe the C wave finished with the truncated fifth wave. We've done that initial move. We came into that buying zone that I was talking about last week. We bought a little bit. We made slightly, we moved slightly lower, but not enough, and now we pushed higher again. Guess from where? For another 61.8 fib. So the first one that we looked at was this back here. As the market was declining, this was the move. We looked at this as being the trigger for the long to the upside right there at that level. But if you can see, the market went up and it never went through that before pulling back. So that was a good indication that those levels work. So we held a little bit here into the 61.8, pushed a little bit higher, and then came back. And instead of holding here and moving higher, we've done maybe an ABCX ABC for a possible wave two, a deep wave two below the 78.6, maybe into something like a 90%, which is still legal. Then we go up in another impulse and we pull back, guess where? Into the 61.8 again. And we're doing a 1, 2, and what it seems to be another small 1, 2, 3. You could have a fourth wave in here, 5, and that would be 1, 2. And then we'll see if it's another 1, 2 in here, then we're going to continue to look for further upside. So for right now, there is really not much to do. And then again, look where it went. It went into the inverse fib of this move, into the 27% of this fib, kind of moving higher, and the next target would be up here towards 71,670, which is the negative 61.8 of this move. So bottom line, I don't want to mess with this. It's not kind of part, unless you're a short term and you're looking for some of these short moves, fine. But for me, this looks good. It's doing kind of what it's supposed to be doing, reacting to the proper fibs, looking impulsive. I want to let it develop. I want to let it see how it goes over the next several days, now that we've got the first initial kind of a signal. And if it continues, it could be, again, just some kind of an ABC higher and we're rolling over. I don't know. But that's kind of where I'm thinking that Bitcoin it is right now. So I'm just going to move these slightly out of the way. And then, we can probably play around if you want. Just spend a little bit more time. Let me get rid of this. And we can do inside this wave 3, we can go just so we can, so you can go 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 3, 4, and 5, something like that we would have in the inside this move. So this is our intermediate count, right? And then we're having our minor. I don't have the minute in here labeled, but you can kind of imagine what I'm saying, right? It's just a wave 1, 2, 3, sideways in 4, up in 5 for the wave 3, then sideways in 4, then another move up in 5, maybe up towards these levels, maybe quality between this wave in here and then the next wave higher, something like that, if this is the level. So let's see if this goes. Let's see if this goes. If it starts to fail and starts to move and you're starting to kind of get below this low and pull deeper, then all this is garbage and we got to rethink this. But, always kind of watch after those impulses. Watch the 61.8 setback. Usually gives good opportunities. And here it was actually beautiful. I didn't see it. But, this kind of with the 3-wave move back to revisit the lows, right, was the indicate 1, 2, 1, 2, and then bam, you push higher out of there. Sometimes those are nice short-term trades to take if you can spot them. And in hindsight, it's always easier, but during that time, you'd be like, ooh, short, stop loss right below the slow, and you risk a little bit to probably make a lot. All right, guys, I'll leave it at that. Thanks for watching. We'll see what life brings tomorrow morning when we open, and then how the markets unfold from here. So, head on a swivel. Watch your risk.